Asteroid of fear.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Men of the House podcast. And today we got John Borden, and he's the author of Your Mindset is Your Reality. He is the owner of GetPsychedFitness.com, and he's an ultra marathon runner and dopamine seeker. And we're going to talk about how we switched up the cheap dopamine for the good one. Because I think at some point in time, we all go down that rabbit hole, and it's not till we get much older that we realize and understand why. So that's where we're going to start. It all starts in our childhood. It sounds so cliche. I was thinking about it as I was walking today before the interview. I'm like, it sounds so cliche, but there's so much truth in that. Taking a look back, what was modeled to you? Because we know as children, we grow up to imitate what was modeled to us, or the modeling we think we want, be it a rock star or something like that. And that relates to that dopamine. And happiness and fulfillment and what we think it is, but we come to understand that it's really something much more deeper than that. Isn't that right?
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for the intro, Rich. You mentioned a rocker. I'm guessing that you were a little bit of a rock star yourself.
No, I played guitar for many years straight and enjoyed going to shows, but never professionally. But it is I would probably say that it's one of my anchors.
I hear that.
Yeah, because like I was telling you earlier, Kyle Smith, he was a heroin addict, and he got clean, and his music reflects so, and it's very inspiring. It's you can hear and relate the journey, the pain, the resilience, and watching him go out there and just do it independently and not rely on anyone and live his dream regardless, because he's been to the bottom, and fuck it, why not? Why not go out there and do your thing? Once you understand that people are mostly self-absorbed and they really care about themselves more than they do anything, they're really not worried about what you're doing. So you might as well take that chance and go out there and do what moves you. And then I think if you can touch other people in the process, that's how we can make a better world.
Yeah, man. That's so big, and one of the things that you touched on while talking about Kyle is just the authenticity that bleeds through his music. And it's so important, whether it's a rock star or an athlete or whoever it is that you look up to. It's the people that try to be something that they're not, that you can feel that lack of authenticity from, and that fail to connect with people. But the
Yeah.
people who really do something because it ultimately aligns with who they are and what they want to bring to the world, regardless of what anyone else thinks, are the ones that have those incredible successes, because it's impossible to not recognize the incredible authenticity that people bring to whatever their art form is. So that's so big, and Rich, you'd asked me about my childhood and growing up and everything like that. And, that's really a big part of my story, my book, and really what leads, the reader and people who, want to get to know me, to really understanding my path and how I got to the point of writing the book, and it being an emotional, transformative experience, both for myself and for the reader who's going through it. And, I grew up a somewhat normal life, right? I mean, normal in the standard American way. My parents split up when I was 12. I had a half brother
Isn't
and a
that
half
wild that
sister.
you describe that as normal?
Yeah. Which, I mean, my parents were together for like 15 years or something like that,
Yeah,
which is a lot longer than most people get. But
true.
it doesn't mean that it was a happy household while they were together, you know. So there was always a lot of strife. My dad was an alcoholic my whole life. He's apparently recently stopped, so I'm very proud of him for that. But you know, grew up with him getting drunk, my mom having a glass of wine a day, which you know normalized alcohol. My stepdad introducing me to whiskey and cigars and
Oh,
adding an air of refinement to it. You know, so it's this thing where you think, okay, I'm being big, I'm being an adult. I can have a glass of wine with dinner. I can have a cigar and whiskey with my stepdad, and then you bring that into college and then it turns into okay, who can drink the most without blacking out, and then
mhm.
you know who can black out and not be embarrassed about what they did while they blacked out, or you know whatever it
It becomes
is.
like this
And
badge of honor. It's so weird. Like I describe it. I'm wearing a Mammoth March shirt, which my buddy and I did this year, and we've done the Bataan Death March twice. And the second time, when I describe how gritty I am, it but it's so stupid. I drank a half a fifth of Jameson and then went and did the Bataan Death March the next day, and then drank the other half a fifth when I got done. And I'm
that's
like,
insane.
exactly. And I wear it like, well, yeah, this is what I'm capable of, but it's really stupid.
Yeah, well, you know, it's kind of one of those things that for the longest time for me, I used my drinking as a I could be an elite athlete if I didn't drink. And so I would continue to drink, continue to do some really good things from, you know, a strength training perspective,
Hmm.
but never really reached the potential that I knew I had inside me, because I was tied to this identity of, well, I can drink like a fucking fish and work out like a maniac and still be good at doing both things. And that's kind of the reason that I'm not an elite athlete, and I'm okay with that. But you know, you realize, or I realized for myself that that was just a story I was telling myself to keep me locked in that good, but not as good as I want to be kind of state. You know, and it's you know, like you said, it becomes a badge of honor for you, especially as you're growing up, as you have other kids around you that are experimenting with alcohol and drugs, and you know, one starts puking and another starts crying his eyes out, talking about an
Hmm.
ex-girlfriend, whatever, and you're like, I still got it together, motherfucker.
Yeah. Oh,
You
I
know,
know.
and
And I went and I graduated high school a year early and joined the Navy, and that didn't. I had my 19th birthday in Japan, got promoted in the same week, and a full
mm,
scholarship. And that didn't help. There was no drinking
yeah,
age,
you
but the
felt like your
culture,
dick was
and
big.
this is circa 1994, and the alcohol culture in the military was 10 times what it is today. But
Hmm.
did you mentioned being an athlete and being able to kind of consume and still perform, um, which is kind of that whole badge of honor of like Navy SEALs. Hey, let's drink a half a fifth and go do 26 miles.
Hmm.
Did you play? Now, did you use alcohol, substances, and did you play sports in high school?
I played sports in high school. Yeah, I was a pretty competitive baseball player. I played
Hmm.
on some nationally ranked teams and stuff like that. I ended up tearing my shoulder up my senior year, and had a decision if I wanted to get it surgically repaired and try to pitch after that, or just go into college without baseball as part of my life. And I chose the latter. You know, it was a really tough decision. And the day after quitting baseball, I actually tried mushrooms for the first time, and that was uh, bad timing. Bad timing.
What
Uh,
what well, let's break that down for a second.
yeah.
What made you, well, you kind of mentioned before that you already had in your mindset that alcohol was this semi crutch. It allowed you to be okay and stay at bay with not being 100% the best version of you.
Hmm.
So it doesn't seem like, to me, I'm not surprised that you arrived at the latter decision. But where where in there did you really kind of decide, like, even if you could have done it, you still may not have made it? And so you kind of before had decided. Did you have any struggles with that, or what was kind of that compelling factor that said, no, I'm not gonna try to go pro, or I'm not gonna pursue this any further. Um, and even if I could get my shoulder back, it may not work out. So fuck it, I'm just not gonna do it. Do you
Yeah.
remember that point?
Well, yeah, so it would have been a goal of mine to get a scholarship to play in college.
Mhm.
Once as soon as I realized that that was an option, right? So that was something I was really gung ho on trying to achieve. And, I worked my ass off in high school trying to maximize my potential, and I was a pitcher. And the first college showcase that I went to, I was warming up, I was long tossing, and I felt a pop in my shoulder. That's weird. Keep throwing. I don't really feel any pain. It just feels like I can't quite get warm. Like I can't quite get to that point of being able to unleash that fastball that I know that I have, right? So I get on the mound and I'm throwing, and I see the scouts, with their guns, looking a little bit uninterested. And so I turn to the guy behind me. I'm like, "What do you got on the gun?" He goes, 78. I'm like, 78? And he's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Oh, what the fuck?" Right? But I finished pitching and I'm going through the reasons in my head. I'm like, did my coaches lie to me saying that I was sitting in the mid 80s? Did, you know, something happen? Like what's up with this? And then I go out to shortstop, which was my natural position, and I field three ground balls and throw them over to first base, and I missed the first baseman on all three for throws.
Oh wow.
I'm like,
Over or under?
all over the place.
Okay.
Yeah, I it so what
So basically,
you
it
know
was like
I
a lack of control.
Yeah, yeah. And that just continued through, that was in the summer before my senior year. Then, through the fall, I was still pitching, but I
Right.
couldn't throw fastballs past people. My curveballs weren't as sharp. Like I was missing all over the place, walking people. And then when I was playing shortstop, I would throw the ball all over the place to first base. And it even got to the point where throwing the ball back to the pitcher in between plays, I would throw it over his head or into the ground or whatever, and I would just run it into him and toss it back underhand because I had no confidence in where the
Yeah.
ball was going. I learned, at the beginning of the spring of my senior year, that I had torn my labrum, but I didn't realize that until much later. And at this point, my confidence is totally fucking shot because I've just been
Mhm.
playing the worst ball of my life for the last 8 months or whatever it was. And so, I'd gone through this period where I thought I was on this upward trajectory with my athleticism and, where I was going, and then it just all crumbles and falls apart. And I'd convinced myself that I just wasn't as good as I told myself that I
Yeah.
was.
Makes
And,
sense.
in retrospect now, I wish that I'd said, you know what, fuck that. I'm gonna, let my shoulder heal. I'll play catcher, I'll play shortstop, whatever I can hit. I, you know,
Even
I
if you'd
still
noticed it before, I feel like that would have been, you could have then connected the dots of like, this is why, and therefore your mindset wouldn't have taken such a dive, because
exactly.
you would have been able to associate it, go, this is why, let's get it fixed and let's
Yep.
start progressing. But so we kind of see how that goes. Um, you make this decision to not go continue on with baseball and subsequently make a decision to go ahead and try some mushrooms.
hmm
How did that come about? Had you considered trying them before? Was it other people were doing them? Because I know like some people did them when I was in high school, but I never did because I was wanting to
hmm
go in the military and stuff, and I didn't want anything holding me back. But what prompted you to do it? Was everybody else doing it? And what was that experience like?
Yeah, well, so my brother was 12 years older than me,
Okay.
and he had, you know, a, a number of different experiences with drugs that he had shared with me, and it never made anything seem like that scary.
Right.
And so I always had this lens that saw drugs as something fun and interesting and not something to really shy away from. I wasn't the type to I've never done heroin or crack
Right.
or anything like that. But, so I was always open to it. I started smoking pot when I was, I think at the end of my freshman year of high school. And So my girlfriend at the time, my senior year, was like, "Hey, me and some of my friends are gonna do mushrooms. You want to join us?" I was like, "Fuck it, sure." So they all did an eighth. I was a little trepidatious. I did half of an eighth, but it still fucking rocked my world, man. We were in a dark, dingy basement with spider webs and shit, and there was this
Mhm.
big ass mirror, and I'm walking in front of the mirror and I look in it and there's a 6-year-old version of myself in a baseball uniform staring back at me like, John, what's wrong? You quit playing baseball. We were supposed to be a baseball player. What happened? And I like had to have a conversation with the 6-year-old version of myself the day after I quit this thing that was this huge part of my life for my entire adolescence. And so I was, nearly suicidal. I was crying my eyes out, telling my girlfriend I was going to go drive my car on the other side of the road, just not in a good place. Um, but, in retrospect, I think that a lot of good came from that because it allowed me to move past that
Mhm.
loss, the loss of me as a baseball player, and move into the next stage of my life, where, you could say whatever you want about uh, my college experience and the habits that I developed there, but I was successful on a number of fronts, maintaining a good GPA while being president of my fraternity, having a strong social life and everything like that. I graduated with a major and a minor, and came out of school with a secure job position that I held for a few years. And it was a nice transition period for me to analyze. The post mushroom experience was a nice transition period for me to be able to analyze what I could do now with my life and how to best optimize myself for the type of life that I wanted to live moving forward. And so, going into college, fraternity life was a big thing that drew me to Seton Hall University, where I decided to go. And so I knew that that would be part of my life, and I made the most of that experience.
Did I find it interesting because you talk about like you have your brother, he's 12 years older, and you say like so you're not looking at drugs from this different point of view. My point of view and reference at that time of my life was like I said, like I was trying to get in the military academies and whatnot, and I didn't want anything on my record.
Hmm.
Um, but I kind of, I've told people when I was young, I had this book called The Big Book of Brain because I was always told like we use such a small percentage of our brain. And so I've always been this seeker of something deeper, um, which would prompt psychedelic use for me at a later date.
Hmm.
But, when you had talked about everything, I was sitting there going, okay, so you have this kind of recreational relationship, like, hey, this is fun. Um, but when you take the psilocybin and you have this experience, you kind of get this understanding that there's something deeper to it. Now, before that experience, and then after it's kind of more obvious, did did you have any idea that mushrooms and psychedelics were a tool, could be a tool? And were you um did you have any sense of exploration of like, I wonder if there's something out there or there's more to my brain and these are tools? Because you obviously got something from it when you talk about, hey, that it allowed you to close a chapter and kind of move on.
Yeah. That's something that I really didn't recognize until
Mhm.
much later, until I had the experience documented in the book, and I'm going back and, thinking about those times earlier in my life and what that meant for me. And so now I can see how, that experience with psilocybin when I was 18 kind of premeditated all of the changes that I was able to make after that, whether that was standing up to one of my many bullies in high school,
Mhm.
whether that was, smiling more and saying hi to people, just being a more open person and trying to put myself out there more. And so I can see all those little seeds and those changes that I was able to make after that. But going into that, I had really no concept of what I was getting myself into. I probably seen, pictures of funny colors and seen
Yeah.
things, and thought it was just going to be it's like weird magical trip that lasted a couple hours and that it'd be fun and that I'd come out of it and had no idea what the emotional impact would be like.
Yeah, a lot of people don't. Now, you mentioned you had a pretty active collegiate life. Now,
Hmm.
did you moving into that after having a psychedelic experience? How did you? What kind of experimentation did you do in college? Did you pursue psychedelics anymore? And how did you view it? Did you view it in a recreational way or like almost like some people in college, you study philosophy, religion, different things, and it can be part of that. Or maybe you're studying neurology and philosophy and trying to see where these things intersect. And part of that collegiate experience of experimentation and studying might be to work with bending the mind
Hmm.
or expanding it. Um, did you have did you approach it like that? Any thought like that? Or how did college go for you with that kind of stuff?
No, man, I was just a dopamine hound, you know. I had tried LSD for the
Hmm.
first time near the end of my freshman year of college, and that was a much more peaceful experience than the psilocybin experience. You know, I was at home with girlfriend that I had at the time and was able to just have deeper conversations and notice intricacies in the mundane and communicate with my cat using our
Yeah.
eyes and facial language and stuff like that. And, you know, I heard all the small things and it shot me back in my brain to the first time I'd ever heard the song. And so there were all these like little things that I picked up where I was like, wow, that was really interesting. I don't know exactly what I experienced. It was a little freaky. I stayed up all night. I wasn't anticipating that, but there was a lot of really interesting stuff that came up from this. So unlike psilocybin that scared the shit out of me and made me suicidal for that, you know, small experience, LSD presented itself as much more interesting. And so I tried that again a number of times throughout college and in the years that followed. I wish I could say that, you know, I went into it with that exploratory mindset. Really, it was recreational, but the positives and those, you know, learning experiences uh, just seemed to reveal themselves to me unintentionally. And so I started to gain an appreciation the more and more that I did it for what it did to help me pick up on those things that I wasn't able to see in my normal state of mind.
Yeah. It's kind of almost like a dot connector in a way. Or
Hmm.
or I describe it as it it, it wipes away everything that's kind of not important and everything that is important is front and center. And
Hmm.
you kind of realize that not much other than love and being kind to one another and our connectivity, that's really all that matters because everything around us is not going with us. So,
Right.
you know, but what how did life unfold for you after college? You said that you held a job for a number of years, but you mentioned chasing dopamine and now like we're talking about mind exploratory type of thing, recreation, whatnot. You said you were chasing dopamine. When
Hmm.
did you realize that that's what you were doing?
Not until 2022. I graduated college in 2015. And so it was a long road of me uh, unknowingly fighting demons. I
What
just
did
thought I
you
was
think it
having fun.
was? Yeah, okay, so like yeah, you say there's like that 7 year gap. So what kind of things were you I mean, I'm similar as a young man. I mean, I skydiving and just acting like a crazy fool as a young man in the military. And
Would
I
still love to
describe I
skydive.
describe it as being an adrenaline junkie, but the
Hmm.
reality is I know my addictive brain now, what it really is. But what kind of things were you doing for thrill seeking?
Uh, Drinking, Coke, and women.
Okay.
Yep. That was my whole life. My mind was completely fixed on getting pussy and doing whatever I felt best to help me do that. And so, I got introduced to Coke my sophomore year of college. I bought it for the first time my junior year. By the time I graduated, it was every time I would drink, there would be Coke. And, it just kind of escalated and escalated and escalated throughout the years until I was doing, basically an 8 ball a week in 2022. And I had my experience. And, throughout all that time, it was all just a means to an end. And that end was the validation that I would get from finding a new sexual partner or doing stuff that, was off the cuff sexually or whatever it
Hmm.
was to just kind of ramp up that experience and, it get into the cycle with porn and, yada, yada, yada. And it's just all this, man, I've spent so much time chasing pussy when there were so many other things that I could have done more constructively with my time and efforts and all of that attention that goes into this pursuit of sex.
What about what about it is well, I met plenty of pussy hounds in my day. And it's interesting because I remember I worked for a mixed martial arts training facility, and one of the guys never had a fucking drink of alcohol in his life, but that dude was a poon hound. You're talking about, like, I used to fuck with him. I mean, he's one of those that was, you know, 38 or 42 and his girlfriend's 23. And I'm like, dude, it's not bring your daughter to work day. Um, but and I've always kind of been fascinated in people that pursue that, because I was always quite the opposite in terms of
Mhm.
I would more be celibate because I was like I felt that getting out there and doing that and too many partners, that it would lead to too much chaos. And so for me, kind of, when I needed to go in, it was about subtraction and being celibate. I went on
Mhm.
like a 3 year celibacy run, and
Damn.
people thought it was weird. Um, and it kind of was, but for me, I felt like I didn't want to pick up extra baggage and shit. And, I couldn't even figure out myself. I didn't need to add other people's emotions and stuff. So yeah, what what is it? Was it like from your? I mean, up into your first sexual experience, like any guy who's waiting to have it, that's not necessarily chasing it. It's just a young man waiting for something that kind of naturally happens. But then once it happens, people either go two ways with it. Either it's kind of a normal, regular thing that you do with a person you love, or it becomes something that people become obsessed with. They skip school, they sneak out of the house, they do all kinds of shit just for that. What was it that amped you up? What did it, I mean, other than the validation?
Yeah.
Did you have it from a young age? I mean, were you always that way?
Well, that's really it, man. Is the validation. I was a small kid. I was always one of the shortest, lightest ones in my class. I got to high school at I think like 105
I
pounds.
was 4'11
And
and 90 pounds as a freshman, so I can,
nice, man.
yeah,
We would have been friends.
yep.
Yeah, and so like being that, that size, I never really got attention from girls when I
Oh yeah.
was really young,
I would date him, but
and
he's cute, but he's short, or blah 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 blah. I've
yeah.
heard it all. It's yeah.
And once I started to mature a little bit and had a little
Hmm.
bit of success with the opposite sex, uh, the validation that I would get from, from the act itself, but also from my peers of like, oh, dude, you hooked
Yeah.
up with so and so. Like it just felt so good and was such like a, yeah, okay,
All of a
this is,
sudden, you're able to stuff it in their face, all the fucking girls, and oh, he's cute, but I
mm-hmm,
well, what uh this is gonna sound so horrible, but I remember a joke that somebody said it was like I would date him, but he's kind of short. It's like I'd date her, but she's kind of fat. And it's like, it doesn't make it right, but when you're young and you're that age and these are the things that we think are important, oh, it's brutal.
Yeah, and when your mind gets fixed on that, and that becomes the one thing that you can go to show people, like, hey, I'm not, the nerdy kid with the best grades in the class. I'm not,
Yeah.
the scrawny kid. I'm the dude that's getting his girls. Like, it just becomes part of your identity is like, okay, well, to validate myself to be this identity that I've constructed for myself, I need to continue to get girls and to continue to pile up names on the roster and yada yada yada. And so, that's really what it was for me. It was just like the one thing that made me feel like I belonged, in regards to other men,
Yeah.
in regards to women, because, I wasn't like the type to have like a million girlfriends, but
Hmm.
if I could make a girl sexually interested in me, then there's a win, like there's an accomplishment. And so it was, the accumulation of everything that I'm trying to do to get validation from guys and to get validation from girls. And it feels fucking great at the same time. So, you
Yeah.
know, it,
It's
it,
yeah. That makes it hard to quit.
you know it,
What
man.
now with that, I told you, like for me, I went the opposite way because I did not want the baggage. I did not need any more fucking trouble in my life.
Hmm.
How did this follow you around? Did it follow you into the workplace? And what kind of, as a result of this behavior and chasing dopamine, give me a few key stories of maybe how your life was maybe a hot mess, some sticky situations that might have got you into because this has to lead to where eventually you're going to say, fuck it, I've had enough and this is dumb and I need to sort myself out and whatnot. But how did
Yeah,
it follow
man.
you around? Did it go into the workplace? Did it go other places?
Yeah, well, so I had graduated college with this girl that I ended up dating for 4.5 years. And so when I was working my first job out of college, it was with Enterprise Rent a Car.
Hmm.
Um, I, you know, I I wasn't doing anything with anybody that I worked with for the first couple of years, but
Right.
then, you meet someone that you have a little bit of connection with, and she's in a relationship, I'm in a relationship, you hide it. It feels like that good sneaky, like, oh my
Yeah.
God, nobody's gonna know. This is like so on the edge and shit. And man, it just creates sticky situations, because then people start noticing at work and
You have to
you
lie.
start to gain a little bit of a reputation, whatever. And so, that follows you around. And then, I, whether it was talking to my girlfriend's friends behind her back, propositioning them, or, doing fucking key bumps of coke while I'm driving on the highway and going 142 miles an hour, or, blacking out in Atlantic City
Mhm.
and waking up in the hospital and then doing Molly in the hospital at 7 a.m. Before driving to work.
Wow. Oh,
Yeah.
hey. Well, yeah, no, I've left a few parties in Miami. It's like daylight, you go to the after party, and then when that ends at like noon or one, you go somewhere else. Oh, it's horrible. Yeah,
Oh
I
yeah.
I don't know. Miami can be a a nice place, but Miami's definitely a place where yeah, uh, it's it is everything, probably like a Vegas that's not all that's kind of lit up and not lit up at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
I've
so
I've seen some like ads for DJs that I'm like, oh yeah, I'd love to go see them. Goes on at 5 a.m. You fucking kidding me?
yeah,
Goes on at 5 a.m.
never fucking ends, man. And it's hard there because yeah, we went to a party once and we got our vehicle towed. And this is like in the 90s. It was way different. And, you know, it gets towed, and then you don't have cash, then you're waiting to get cash wired to you, and the banks don't open till like 9, and then it's like time differences, and they're going to charge you for another day. You can't sleep on the beach. You got to keep it moving because Miami-Dade goes onto the beach. It was just like, I was like, and I had, yeah, we had gone to a rave, and I had LSD in my sock, and was didn't plan on taking it, but I guess it absorbed through. And when you end up,
That's what I was
your
assuming.
your vehicle gets towed, and then you're just stuck in Miami on foot, candy flipping, um, for 14, 16 hours. When you finally get it all wrapped back together, I think I only went back to Miami one time after that to see a
Yeah,
show.
that'll leave a scar.
Yeah. So you talked about, it does put you in this situation, and it's because of the behaviors, and it's the dopamine. Um, when do you understand that, or when do you make the connection of the dopamine and the substances, that you're using one to chase the other? Because some people think like maybe they're doing drugs to do drugs, um, but you were actually chasing dopamine. And
Hmm.
maybe a lot of people are, and maybe they don't understand it, but they're fulfilling one of their needs somehow through that. When did you
Yeah.
realize you were chasing dopamine? And when did you make a decision to, you said 2022 is kind of, I want to hear about that kind of rock bottom, but when did you understand you were chasing dopamine and make a deliberate decision to chase it differently?
Yeah, well, so, the in 2020, I had gotten laid off from the job that I was working when COVID hit. And
Mhm.
so I had like 6 months unemployed where I was, looking for a job, but, drinking pretty much every day, doing coke pretty much every day, playing video games, trying to find someone off Tinder, like, just going through this rinse and repeat cycle. And at one point, I hit up the guy that I bought Coke from, and I was like, "Yo, I'm looking for Molly. Can you help me?" And so he puts me in contact with this guy that he knows. And the guy goes, "Well, you know, I, it's not like Molly, but I've got something similar." Uh, and I'm like, "Oh, well, I'm looking for Molly." And he's like, "All right, let me see what I can do." And so he tells me he's got Molly. So I go to his apartment in Newark, New Jersey, which is not a place that you want to spend a lot of time in.
Nope.
Uh, and I pull into the parking lot. He has me pop the trunk. He throws a bag in the trunk. He hops in the passenger seat. I give him $200 and he's gone. And I go home and I look at it. I'm like, this definitely isn't Molly. So, I do my searches. I figure out that it's ketamine. I'm like, what's ketamine? And what I'm reading is it's like a party drug that's used kind of similar to ecstasy. And I'm like, okay, well, that'll
Time
be
to get
fun. I'm
K-hold.
yeah, I'm not gonna try it yet, but when the time is right. So one night I'm drinking, I'm playing video games, I'm doing coke, and I run out of coke at like 2 a.m. And so I'm like, well, I've got this ketamine, let's give that a shot. So I chop up a coke size line and do it. And I go back to my PlayStation and it starts to hit me. And I'm like, guys, I need to go. So I log off and then immediately just fucking drop into a K-hole on my bed. And I couldn't tell you what exactly I saw there, but I do know that it showed me that I had a problem with drinking and Coke. And so that
It's
was
a
a big, like,
dissociative. So,
mhm,
when I worked in the ER, like if they're putting I think sometimes like they put your arm back in place and all that, they get,
mhm.
we had this one doc, you go, break out the key to mine. And because, yeah, I think it dissociates. So you kind of like you don't know, but kind of don't. So it's
Yeah.
interesting that that showed you that.
Yeah, well, I think it was just that moment where I realized, okay, I'm in this position where I'm completely immobile on my bed and I don't really know what's going on because I'm chasing the Coke, right? And because I thought that this would be similar, and because I stayed up all night and day doing coke already, I'm in this position. And so once I had that experience, it's like, okay, I've got a problem. How do I stop this? Because it wasn't just immediate, okay, recognize it, make a change.
Yeah.
And so, the first thing that I went to was weed. I hadn't smoked weed regularly since I was probably a sophomore in college. But I had a friend tell me that it's great to help you with getting to bed because I had to have a drink in my system if I was to fall asleep. So I started smoking instead of having
I'm
my
not going to
customary
advocate
drink
for
or two.
people to do it, but when I stopped drinking 2 years ago, weed was one of the things that took the edge off and helped when I would get bitchy for cravings or whatever and sleep. So while I'm not going to tell people, yes, you should do that, I definitely think it's one of the better alternatives.
Yeah, most definitely. And now I'm at the point in my life where I've been smoking pretty much regularly since that point.
Hmm.
And I don't notice. I mean, it's possible that I'm blind to issues that I've created with that,
Right.
just like I was blind to how my drinking was really affecting me. But if it is a negative, it's very subtle
Yeah.
in that way.
But it helped
And
you.
it's
It helped you to kind of kick the coke.
Yeah, well, I could fall asleep now without having a drink. And if I was doing lines until midnight and then I rip the bowl, then all of a sudden I don't have this like, oh my God, I have to fucking
How hard
chase
was
the
it to
coke.
get
And
off coke? Because there's one I think. What is it like? Heroin's more physiological, and cocaine is psychologically addictive.
hmm
So you don't necessarily maybe have the physical craving type of thing, but I'm sure your brain kicks in to do it. How difficult was it, and what would you do to get off of it? What kind of tricks or tips or white knuckle it? What's it called?
Yeah, well, so that experience I was just talking about was in the fall of 2020.
Hmm.
And I didn't stop doing coke until 2 years after that.
Oh wow.
Yeah, because what happened was is that, I recognized, oh my God, I'm in this like terrible cycle. I need to change. So I picked up weed. I decided to move back home to my mom's house.
Hmm.
And then shortly after that, so this whole time that I'm making this transition, I'm still doing it, but not nearly as much.
Right.
I'm, commuting a long ways for work. I had to drive 4 hours Monday and Friday to locations in either Albany or Massachusetts, and then drive 4 hours back. And so, it's this thing where, okay, I'm now 2 hours from all of my friends that are in Northern Jersey. I don't have, you know, really an excuse to do it. I would still do it every now and then, a couple
Right.
bumps, just like hanging around the house and stuff like that. But it wasn't really to the point where it was this major detrimental piece of my life. But then when I ended up moving to Connecticut for a job, and when I got up there, it started to come back harder and heavier than ever. And at that point, the weed had kind of lost its ability to stop it in its tracks and just kind of became part of this triumvirate of, alcohol, coke, and weed that would just persist and persist and persist until, there was something to fucking stop me from doing that, whether it's work or whatever. And so, all of my free time basically was spent drinking, doing coke. And that continued in, a worse scenario than I had experienced ever because, now I'm living in Connecticut. So I'm away from pretty much all of my friends. I had one guy that I lived with who was a great friend of mine, but other than that, I didn't know anybody. So it was just drinking alone, doing coke alone, trying to go out to bars to meet people or go to the golf course and whatever. And
Isolate.
so yeah, yeah. And so, it was just alcohol, coke, alcohol, coke, alcohol, coke, pussy, alcohol, coke, alcohol,
Hmm.
coke. And you know, I had so many mornings where I'd wake up just disgusted with myself from what I did the day before. But none of that was the big enough wake up call for me to be like, okay, I'm making this change and I'm doing it now. I'd been up in Connecticut and I totally fucking reached rock bottom. I was doing this job where I was a regional operations manager. I was overseeing, like a 100-mile territory for hospital cleaning and disinfecting,
Mhm.
which sounds important, but in reality, it means that you're covering the work of the minimum wage employees that don't want to show up. And so I'm cleaning toilets until 3 a.m. and then waking up early the next morning to go out to offices and, taking out the trash and mopping and yada, 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 and all this stuff that, you know,
I was a practice manager, so I know Sodexo, all of them. Housekeeping was our hardest part, and because I had a big box facility that has a gym and everything, and so it
hmm
comes cleaned overnight, and the door locks at 1:50, and every time the housekeeper went when it wasn't 1:50 the wrong way, I got a call. I'll wake
mm,
up, and so yeah, man, it's a very difficult job, and getting those people, keeping good people like that are hard to do. And when you're the regional manager, like you said, you get a no show. It still needs to be done, and you're driving in the middle of the night who to all the different clinics. Um, yeah,
yep. And
gosh,
and tack on top of it, it was COVID. So not only do people
oh
not want to work in hospital situations, but it makes hiring impossible.
yeah,
People have to be vaccinated to bring them in. And so, it was like months of not being able to fill these positions and me working, I don't even want to put a number on it, but just as much as I needed to make sure that stuff didn't fall to shit. And, during that period, I had this moment where I got a call that two of my employees had showed up after having just smoked weed, and it was the only uh, location where employees would show up while the staff was there. And of course, they fucking smoked a J in the car right before going in, so I had to go in and fire them. And so it was 2 months from that point, where I'm just grinding to the fucking bone, uh, of trying to find a new job, trying to uh, do something different. I'm blaming the job for me not being able to meet people in Connecticut and this horrible work-life balance that I have and yada yada yada. And I interviewed for Purina
mhm.
dog food, to be a prescription pet food sales rep for the greater Hartford area. And I go out to eat and I'm able to sit down at a restaurant for the first time since I got that call, uh, a few months prior. And there's this guy next to me. And, he's got a smile on his face. He's talking to the bartender. He's talking to the people next to him. It's just good vibes. And so I start chatting and we start to realize that we have all of these commonalities in our earlier lives. We were both presidents of our fraternity. We were both baseball players. We both started out with a company, me Enterprise Rent a Car, his all these supermarkets, and skyrocketed through the company very quickly. The difference was that I got fired for something at Enterprise that I really didn't think was my fault. My office had gotten broken into and robbed on a Friday night when I was home sitting on my couch. And, I went to the branch and saw that two cars had been stolen. They smashed in the front window with a shovel. And, when my higher ups asked me, well, how did this happen? My response was to blame the people that trained me and the culture of Enterprise as a whole and not, following up on small, minute details like locking the keys in the safe at the end of the night. And so rather than take responsibility for that, I pushed off blame. And so it caused the people who had entrusted me with the leadership position that I had to no longer trust me. And, they made a decision that was in the company's best interest, but I thought that, it was them trying to send a message because I was the top performer that, if you fuck up, anybody can get it. And so I just blamed everybody and anyone that I could for me getting fired from that, uh, other than myself. And so I'm sitting there, I'm talking to this guy, and he tells me the truth that nobody else in my life had ever given me. And he said, that shit was your fucking fault. Your girlfriend leaving you, that was your fucking fault. You being up here in Connecticut, that's your fault. You took the job. Like, what are you complaining about? This is the life that you chose. And you're not miserable because of this shit or that shit or because of whatever anyone else did. You're miserable because you're choosing to be miserable, because you're looking at all of this without the lens that allows you to understand that you have the ability to choose your own life. but nothing's going to change for you until you take control of your life and stop blaming other people. And that was one of those moments where I just wanted to tell the guy to fuck off and tell him he's an asshole, but I didn't. I stopped and listened. You know, I realized that he was right. And you know, so after that, I ended up not getting the job with Purina that I was really confident that night while I was sitting at the bar
Right.
that I had gotten. And I was grateful that I didn't because it allowed me to shift my focus to getting a work from home job. And so I did that, and that allowed me to trip down to Florida and then up through Georgia and the Carolinas. Decided to move from Connecticut to Tampa. And so I made that move in April of 2022. And when I came down, I had moved down with a half ounce of Coke on me and ended up purchasing 3 more ounces over the time between when I moved down and in October of 2022. And my life started to change with the psilocybin. And, you know, so the decision point of quitting Coke actually came after 2 experiences with psilocybin, a half gram and a 1 gram dose that were spaced out by about 2 weeks. But what that allowed me to do was start looking at the choices that I was making on an everyday basis and decide to make different choices. And so, you know, we had planned to go to a Halloween party, myself and 30 of my closest friends that I had made here in Tampa. And so I invited everybody over my apartment. I put out a tray of Coke. I was passing it around to everybody who wanted it. And I went and I did my first line. And I'm kind of like, what the fuck am I doing? And like, I was up till 4 a.m. last night. I feel like shit. We're about to go out to this party that like I don't even really want to go to, but I know that I should because of the social expectation. And so I'm using Coke to get myself amped up enough to be able to go to this party. And then what? I'm just going to keep going to the bathroom, keep going to the bathroom, keep going to the bathroom. And I sit there and I turn to my friend next to me and I'm like, dude, I don't even like Coke. Like, what the fuck am I doing? And he's like, I mean, you don't have to do it. And I'm like, yeah, I think I'm done. And so that was the last line of Coke I ever did.
Wow. It's, you know, it it reminds me of this lesson I try to um, show my daughter in real time sometimes. It's like we go into a store or something, and she's like, "Well, I didn't see anything I like," and I go, "And that's okay. You don't have to buy anything. You can walk
Hmm.
out of here with nothing. We came, we looked, we saw. That's the purpose, you know. One doesn't
Yep.
have to equal the other." And so that was awesome. The way that kind of way you said, like, "Hey, I, I don't like this. You know, it's like I'm doing this and it's going to cause me to do these series of things that I don't even like to do. What the
Hmm.
fuck am I doing? I think I'm done." So, how did it kind of go from there? Were you able to kind of cold turkey? I mean, what did you do to kind of substitute it? Did you know it was going to kind of mind fuck you and um you'd had plenty of experience with going with without using over an extended amount of time. How did you plan? What kind of intentions did you set to overcome it and conquer it to get your brain kind of moving back forward in the positive direction?
Yeah, well, you know, it's funny because, you know, it wasn't like that, okay, I'm done with it. It was,
Mhm.
all right, I don't want to do it right now, so I'm not gonna do it right now. I'm not gonna go out to this party. I bought a ticket to it, but I was like, you know what? Fuck this. I just don't feel like going out. I'm gonna stay home. I'm just gonna enjoy a night by myself. You guys go have fun.
Right.
And you know, the next few days after that, like I was in sales, I was doing sales over the phone, and I would do key bumps throughout the day to get my energy up and
Hmm.
be able to power through the day. And at the times when I would go into my room and normally go do that, I was like, do I really want to do this? No. And then I went out with my friends for a night, and I'm like, do I want to bring this with me? Like, no, let's leave it at home. And so I was packing for EDC, which is where my book kind of centers around is this trip to EDC and the experimentation that I'd done with the psilocybin leading up to it, and then using it there and the revelations that I had. But I'm packing for EDC, and I've got probably like a quarter ounce of Coke left. And so I throw that in my bag. And then I'm like, why? Do I really want to do this? Do I want to bring this to a show? Do I want to feel this like on edge and jitteriness and like total up energy? Or do I just want to experience it? And it was like, no, I don't need it as a crutch. Like I don't want to have it. And so it was just all of those little moments where rather than following through on that impulse, I was
Right.
able to pause for a half second and ask myself if what I was doing was actually what I wanted to do. And the answer was no, time and time and time again, until I no longer had to ask myself that question.
Man. So what do you kind of do instead? How do you how do you start filling that time? Because and then you realize how much time you actually spent doing that.
Oh yeah.
What do you start doing to pick up? And also um once you understand your time swap, um how did you forgive yourself for wasting some of that time?
Well, the forgiveness part came really easily. Um, the time that I did the 1 gram of mushrooms before going to EDC,
Mm-hmm.
I had been up until 4 a.m. the night before doing my thing. I woke up late to go out on a boat with my friend who had invited me out on his boat. So I wake up hungover. I pour some pre-workout, a shot of vodka, high noon into a shaker bottle, and go out there, have a few drinks. I come home. I'm like, all right, guys, let's go out. Let's go to the bars. Like, the Phillies were in the NLCS at that time. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm like, let's go out and watch it. And they're like, I don't know, I'm kind of feeling like low key. And I'm like, all right, well, I got some mushrooms. You guys want to try some mushrooms? So we ate a gram. I hadn't really understood what the dosing of mushrooms was like at that point. So I'm trying to figure out what the right point is. And I thought that that would get me to the point where I'm tripping. But if you know mushroom dosages, it's pretty far ways away from
Yeah.
doing that. But it came with this like beautiful clarity of vision, and my hearing was sharper, and I was more low key and tuned in to my friends and the world around me. And I went from my apartment to the Riverwalk, which is, the Riverwalk's along the Hillsborough River, which runs through the center of Tampa. They have a Gasparilla parade where all the boats go through the center of town. It's a beautiful, beautiful spot that I had always recognized as nice, but never truly appreciated it for the beauty that it was until this night that I walked down there and see the moon reflecting off the water and see all the people out and families and just people having a great time and experiencing life and experiencing the beauty of this night in the mid 70s and in October in Tampa, where you know there's just so much natural beauty around to be grateful for. And as I sit there, I kind of zoom back through my mind, and I had grown up with the Delaware River in my front yard. And so, it was kind of this juxtaposition of where I was that night on the Hillsborough River and the earliest memories I had of growing up on the Delaware River and all of the time that passed in between and all of the mistakes that I had made, all the time wasted, all the, rumination about what I should or shouldn't be doing. And all of it just stopped. And I was okay with being where I was at that moment because all of those things, good, bad, or otherwise, had to happen to bring me there to that point where I was in this beautiful city. I had a great group of friends. I had, a stable job. I was, in shape and yada, yada, yada. And I just said nothing of what happened before matters because I'm here right now. And so being upset with myself about whatever I did earlier in life has no value. So just choose to be happy with where you are right now and know that your life's going to go in a better place. And so, when I had that realization, that was a, a week before I decided to, that I had that last line of Coke. Um, and I never I never experienced that, oh my God, I wasted so many years because it's obvious that I did. But
Right.
at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. And, ruminating on that and placing, any mental effort into that just does me no good. So, I just chose to be okay with whatever it was and accept my past for what it was and realize that I had the ability to decide what my future is going to be, and that's all that matters.
And how did you decide this future? So, um, where does writing a book and deciding to do ultra marathons? Now, it's no secret that most people who have this addictive quality in their brain, when they stop doing one thing, they start doing other things. I mean, I stopped drinking 2 years ago and I've lost 64 pounds and, gone
Congrats.
from 9 prescriptions to one. My blood pressure, I mean, I always say that I had high blood pressure 50 pounds ago, when I was 25, a runner, it's hereditary. But yeah, how do you get into this ultra marathon running, and when and where do you decide to write a book?
Yeah, well, so the decision to write the book actually came right after I had my experience with psilocybin that I deemed as transformational. And, it
Where
was,
was this? Where actually, let's take one step back. You talked
Mhm.
about EDC and psilocybin. What was this revelational point? What did it do to you? What did it show you?
Yeah. Well, there's so many. And, it was really just kind of like realization after realization after
Mm,
realization. And I had that moment on the Hillsborough River. And then 2 weeks later, the week before I leave for EDC, I decided to just jump in and make myself trip. And so I eat the biggest mushroom in the bag that I had had, and fucking shot off into the universe and saw myself on a spider chart with myself and anybody that I've ever met in my entire life connected to me through energy. And so I could visualize the connections that I had and the energy that I or the other party was putting into this connection to keep it alive. And I saw the ex-girlfriend that I had had when I left college, and I'd seen that I was continuing to put energy into that, and she wasn't.
oh,
And it caused me to think about all of the pain that I had caused her and why she would choose to,
not put
completely
anything.
cut someone else out energetically, who had played such a large role in her life. And so that kind of like was the bad trip of all bad trips, just crying for hours uncontrollably, but finally recognizing that I had put myself in that situation. I had done all of these things to create this terrible experience for the both of us. And so that was extremely emotionally cleansing. And then I went to EDC the weekend after and realized on the first night there that I had been looking at relationships as validation, as a way to keep myself from this feeling of loneliness and this feeling of solitude that I had. And then, Saturday when I was there, realized that I'd been chasing pussy just for the validation. And so I kind of flipped a switch in my mind to no longer look at girls as just a sexual object and actually, like, look
Yeah,
people in the eye and have genuine conversations. And then,
they're a person just like you and me.
yeah, amazing, right? It took way too long to understand that.
Yeah, it's the same like
Um,
well, like what I try to tell people about children too. I mean, like remember they're little people and they're going to grow up
mhm.
to be like you and I. So like whatever you're showing them or putting into them, try to make sure it's positive.
Most definitely, man. Um, and then Sunday when I was at EDC, I realized, okay, I'd been this like anxious ball of, anxiety and depression and drug usage and alcoholism and yada yada yada, but I'm not going to be that anymore. And as I'm there and I'm reflecting on my life and all of the time that I put into maintaining my body and everything like that, I just gained this appreciation for who I am and the person that I built myself up to, regardless of, whatever I had
Yeah.
done in the past. And I had this moment where I got a message. Okay, you're good. You recognize that you're okay. You're strong. You have the ability to do whatever you set your mind to. Go help other people. And so I got that message, and you know, it's that like, okay, help other people, how,
Yeah.
you know?
Hmm.
And so I leave EDC, I come home, and I I really just start to get to work on myself, right? I had this vision of how I wanted my life to look and who I wanted to be. And so I got really clear on what I wanted to, how I wanted to present myself and how I wanted to be moving forward. And so I started cleaning my apartment, organizing, doing all these little things, reaching out to friends, having conversations. And a moment came about a week afterward when um, I was sitting in the hot tub and I started to think about my brother. And I told you briefly about my brother who's 12 years older than me, and uh, his experience with substances was uh, heavier and more detrimental than mine was. And when I was a freshman in college, he had been sober for 6 months at that point from crystal meth. When he was leaving a Narcotics Anonymous meeting and got run over by an SUV from behind. After hitting him on his motorcycle, uh, he got thrown out into the intersection, and the SUV drove over him and dragged him under the car for 3/4 of a mile. They then took him out from under the car, dumped him between parked cars on the side of the road, and left him to die. He gained the strength to stand up and walk to find help, and this is with 6 fractured vertebrae, his skull scraped down to the bone, no muscle on the right side of his body, his back, his shoulder, or anything like that. And I got a call from my sister at midnight. Ryan's been in an accident. We need to go to the hospital. And so we go to the hospital. And my sister is obviously an emotional wreck. My dad sees him. He's collapsed on the floor with emotion. My mom is inconsolable, whatever it is. Um, and I felt nothing. I didn't feel a single shred of emotion. And I believe that's because I saw my brother as this person that, introduced me to drug culture and alcohol culture and made partying seem, like the fruit of life. And um, he had stolen from me and, hurt me in a number of different ways and hurt my family through, whether it's theft or just emotional uh, irreverence. And I just saw this as another way that he made my family's life harder. And I was completely emotionally disconnected from it. And, he ended up, you know, getting addicted to painkillers and then heroin and then back to rehab. And, through all of this is just, living the lifestyle of someone who doesn't have his shit together. But in 2022, when I decided to move to Florida, I stopped home in Jersey, leaving from Connecticut, and I saw him and his new girlfriend, who is now his fiance, who was the first like normal person that he had
Hmm.
dated, someone that wasn't,
Like in that
a
circle.
drug addict or yeah. And um, he paid me back for stealing my wallet 10 years prior, and there were just crumbs of this person that he's choosing to become now and choosing to be a better person. And, when he repaid me for my wallet and we had that trip and everything, I appreciated it, but I really didn't internalize it until after I got back from EDC and I'm sitting in the hot tub and I'm thinking about this. And I'm like, holy fuck, my brother is a miracle. And he's turning himself into be something to be very proud of. And it just hit me that, I had still had this vision of my brother as this derelict person who did so much damage to myself and my family and everyone around him and was no good for so long in his life. But now he was the man that he wanted to be. And so it allowed me to forgive my brother and really create this emotional connection where he was now my brother. He was no longer, my
Yeah.
12-year-old half brother who just wasn't in my
Hmm.
life the way that you would expect an older brother to be. And so I called him and I had a conversation with him and just, kind of shared how much that I appreciated him and was grateful for him to be alive and be able to actually be a big brother to me. And, I said, holy shit, if this psilocybin can help me stop doing coke, stop binge drinking, which is a promise that I had made to myself on Saturday at EDC, um, which I, chosen to stop binge drinking. Alcohol is still in my life in a, smaller clip, but regardless, it can help me get organized and make my apartment clean and have more genuine conversations with people, and it can help me heal my relationships with my family.
Hmm.
There is so much potential good to be gained from this for people in the world. I need to tell my story so that psilocybin isn't pigeonholed as this thing that can only help end of life cancer patients or
Right.
soldiers with PTSD or whatever. It can help people who feel like they're normal, feel like they have their life together, but just really haven't processed the emotional things that they've been through and haven't reached that point of being able to truly connect with people in their lives. And so, I decided to write it um, as this case study for how it could be used for people who feel like they don't have anything to gain from it,
Hmm.
but really don't know how deeply their problems go and how big of a change that they're able to make.
It's interesting because, yeah, it's like as you tell your story and I look at it um, as if it were a movie, kind of like you said, you it did this thing where it really connected you to you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like you were just kind of on autopilot, half in, half out for a long time. But you know, it was really the connection to yourself is what gave the space to help heal with your family and whatnot. You know, yeah, that helped. But if it hadn't worked within you on a personal level, you wouldn't have been receptive enough to see that in the first place. But
That's exactly it.
so you wrote a
And
book. How were you? Was it as difficult, more difficult as you thought?
great question. Um, so I had in my mind for a while that I wanted to write something eventually. I had always
Right.
been the type to I was a high achiever in school. I was always the type to get A's on all my papers and everything like that. I had one of my professors reach out to me about turning one of my research papers into a scholarly article and stuff like that. So I always knew that I had a talent for writing. Um, but once I got that why, it kind of allowed me to say, you know what, fuck everything else that, I may or may not need to take care of. I'm going to focus on this. And if I focus on this, how I know that I can focus and put myself to it, I'm going to accomplish this. And, it took me like a year and a half from the time that I started writing to get it completed. And, I wouldn't describe any of it as difficult, but just understanding that it's a very long process and it takes a long time to accumulate your thoughts in a way that makes sense in how I write it, but also in how it makes sense for the reader, and to put it in a storyline that people are going to want to read and be encapsulated or be captured by the writing and have an emotional tie to it themselves. And so it was definitely a really big figuring out process. I approached it like I approach a lot of stuff in life, which is if I got an idea, just go and figure it out.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of planning done or anything like that. It was more so, okay, this is what I know that I want to say. This is what I want to know I want to write about, and start writing and figure out the details of how it all fits together. In the meantime, when I first started writing, I was kind of thinking like, okay, I don't know how long this is going to be, maybe, 20, 30,000 words. And I was
Yeah.
looking up, books that are around that size. And I'm like, okay, well, Old Man in the Sea is only about 20,000 words, and that's done pretty well. So, regardless, if I can get to that point, I'm fine. It ended up being 66,000. So,
Oh wow.
yeah, really just, expand and expand and expand. You realize that you need to explain things or tell stories that make certain revelations make sense or whatnot. And so it turned out to be a much longer project than I was originally anticipating. Um, and there were so many times that on a Saturday afternoon, I'm not going out and hanging out with friends. I'm just sitting down with my laptop and typing and typing and typing and,
Yeah,
finding any time that I can to get after it.
that's the hard part is like you think about it. That's kind of what where my thought process and wondering was kind of how do you stay uh, focused over like an 18-month process because if you think about it, I mean, like me losing 64 pounds, like it took a long time and I didn't really think about it. It was just kind of like, because you don't see anything for so long. And then one day you wake
Hmm.
up and it's different. But if you asked anyone, I mean, I don't care what it is. If you said, hey, you want to do this? And they're like, yeah. And you're like, well, it's going to be 18 months is when you're going to see the results. They're going to be like, fuck that. I mean, equivalent of being like, hey, if you were waiting in line for a restaurant or a slice of pizza, if that slice of pizza is this, would you be willing to wait 18 months for it? And a lot of people wouldn't, and that
Hmm.
takes a lot of, you got to stay grounded. But when did you get into ultra running in this process? Did this come after EDC? The right, you'd mentioned kind of maybe I think going for a jog before. Is running something you always did? And how did you get into ultra marathons?
Nah, man, so I was a pitcher. So we
Mhm.
would have to run, I think, a quarter mile for every inning that I pitched. So I got
Yeah.
pretty used to running about 2 miles. And so I did that in high school. And then when I got to college, I started to run on the treadmill to test myself to see how quickly I could run, a mile, 2 miles, 5K, and, consistently just tried to push myself to be better there as part of my just getting after it
Mhm.
athletically. I had learned to lift when I was in high school for baseball, and that turned into a really deep passion for weightlifting when I got to college. And, so running was a part of that my freshman year, but then I pledged my fraternity and stopped
Yeah.
running then and never picked it back up. And so it had been 11 years, 11 and a half years since I had run regularly. And, um, I had this experience with the psilocybin in 2022, and it just allowed me to evaluate everything that I was doing in life. And one of those was that I had just been really heavy into powerlifting, and that was
Mhm.
my only focus was trying to get my bench, squat, and deadlift up as high as possible. And it left my body in this super tight, rigid state. Where I really felt immobile. I didn't feel like my body was operating correctly. So I started to do more yoga. One of the things that I
I
did,
have this picture of like a big bulky guy doing bumps.
Mhm. Yes, that's
Power
exactly
lift,
what it was.
power bumps.
Yeah, man. You want to get a PR, there's your motivation right there. Um, yeah, and so I'd gotten back from EDC, and one of the things that I did was fix the bike that had sat in unusable condition for 3 years in my apartment. I had moved from New Jersey to Connecticut and down to Tampa, and hadn't gotten it fixed the whole time, and all it needed was a new tube in the tire. But I walked past it every fucking day, like, oh yeah, I'll get that done at some
Yeah,
point,
right.
and just never did. But eventually I got it fixed and, started to go for bike rides after work rather than, sitting smoking pot and playing video games and, scrolling on Tinder or whatever. And so I started to go for bike rides and started out as, a mile and, you do that for a little bit and then eventually it grows and it grows. And, it got to the point where over the summer in 2023, I was going for like 8, 10 mile rides and stuff like that and felt pretty good about it, but hadn't still hadn't run at all. Um, and I'm going through this period of my life where I had lost so many of my friends that were really my drinking buddies. And I was going through this like intense, like lonely chapter and part of my life where I really felt disconnected from what I felt my purpose was, because I had this calling to help people, but my day-to-day job is selling websites to real estate agents. And so like
Right.
how much you actually help when people do that. You can try to spin it in your mind and say, oh, this is really good for them and their business and yada, yada. But like, really, you're not getting that sense of fulfillment of like, oh my God, you changed my life or anything like that. And so, my job's unfulfilling. My social life is pretty unfulfilling. I'm still like hanging out with friends, going out and having like 3, 4 drinks, but I just like can't connect with people in the same way. And so, there was just this like big part of me that felt uh, empty. And one of the things that, had happened once I realized like how tight and rigid my body was is that I stopped putting effort into trying to chase, physical strength gains. And that left me with really nothing that I was pursuing heavily other than my writing. And so, you know, September of 2023, I saw that there was a Spartan race in Central Florida. And I reached out to a couple of my buddies who were into running to see if they wanted to do it with me. They say, yeah. I say, okay, cool, let's sign up. So I sent them the link. A month later, I'm like, hey, did you guys ever sign up? Crickets. A month later, hey, you guys still want to do that race? And now it's 2 weeks before the race, and they're not doing it. And I'm like, you know what? Fuck this. I've wanted to do one of these things for the longest time. I'm gonna sign up for it for me.
Right.
And I had a choice. Do I sign up for the 5K, 10K, or a half marathon? And so I'm like, all right, well, let's see what I can do running, right? So I run and I go for 3 miles without stopping. And I'm like, okay, that's good. Um,
5K check.
let Yeah, let me see if I can run for an hour straight. And so on a Saturday night, I'm telling myself, okay, tomorrow I'm going to run for an hour straight. And if I can run for an hour straight, I'm going to sign up for the half marathon. And so I'm laying in bed and I say to myself, you know what? Fuck this. I'm not giving myself that condition. I'm signing up for the half marathon. So I got up out of bed. I went to my computer. I signed up for the half marathon. The next day, I go for my run. I run for an hour straight. I get the runner's high for the first time. I'm like, whoa, this is fucking crazy.
Yeah.
But, I show up on race day 2 weeks later, and, it was so uncomfortable, cramps everywhere, just
Yeah.
pain throughout my body, extreme exhaustion, like to the point where, I finished the race and just fucking collapsed there for like 30 minutes. But I did it and I powered through and I showed myself how much strength that I have that I've been denying myself of, thinking that this half marathon is bigger than I'm capable of. But really, I am extraordinarily capable and I'm able to do this thing that people put a lot of time and effort into training. And I finished in the top 5% of the open division, not the
Oh, wow.
competitive, but the open division.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm like, man, I am so much more powerful than I've been giving myself credit for. Let's continue to find ways to challenge myself. And so, the next month I started 75 hard, which was
Hmm.
my way to stop drinking. I told
Yeah.
myself if I can give myself a bigger reason to not drink than to have those couple drinks when I go out with friends, that it'll give me that space to distance myself from it, and that'll be like the start of my new life. And it absolutely was. The last time that I had a drink was on January 5th of last year. So we're now approaching 18 months without a drink. So
Awesome.
that's pretty dope. Um, and so February of that year, I do another Spartan. I do a triathlon in April. I do a third Spartan in May. And I'm kind of going through the summer. I bought a house and working on the house, like working out, but not like really getting after it. But I start to pick up the running a little bit and get to the point where I can run 10 miles pretty comfortably. And uh, I went to I went to Colorado. My family was having a reunion for my aunt and uncle's 50th wedding anniversary, and so I go out there, and we're in Colorado Springs, and there's this mountain called Pikes Peak that my dad took me to the top of when I was 2 years old, and he's like, "Hey, you want to drive to the top of Pikes Peak?" And I'm like, "Nah, I'm gonna hike
Run it. Oh, yeah.
it." So I show up there on Thursday morning after flying in Wednesday. Uh, so going from zero elevation in Florida to 6,000 feet elevation at the base, and then tried to make it to the top of a 14er, and would have died if I tried to continue to go all the way, but smartly turned back around the halfway mark. And so, I do that, and I'm proud of myself for accepting the challenge, even if I didn't complete it.
Right.
Uh, and then so I come back home to Florida, and that next Tuesday, I get a call from one of my friends, and he's like, "Hey, dude, I just signed up for this race on Saturday. You want to do it with me?" And so I ask him, "What kind of race?" And he's like, "It's an ultra marathon." How long? 46 miles. He had done the triathlon with me, and he
Hmm.
tapped out. He couldn't make it through the swim. And so I have this competitive mindset. I've always been hyper competitive, where I'm like, all right, you're doing it,
I'm
I'm gonna
doing it.
fucking do it. Yeah. So we sign up on Tuesday with basically zero preparation, but show up on race day and fucking powered through it, man. Hit a major wall at mile 30 and told myself I was gonna stop, but you know, then just kept telling myself one foot in front of the other, one foot in front of the other. And 46 miles later, I had completed this thing that seemed so far out of my wheelhouse that I couldn't describe it, but it showed me that I could complete something that and the first Spartan did as well. I could complete something that seems completely insurmountable, and so there's no reason to limit myself in what I choose to do. And so that's the one ultra that I've done, but I have a couple more on the schedule for later this year. Um, in the meantime, I've done uh, more Spartan races. Most recently, I finished fifth in my age group, just 47 seconds from the podium. In the most recent one that I did, I completed two strongman competitions, which is obviously a totally different realm than
Oh yeah.
ultramarathon running. I won the Spirit of Strength Award, which is this giant belt that they gave to me for putting on the best show in the competition. I showed up as probably the lightest guy in the field and didn't finish in last in my grouping, and really really pushed myself to the limit and gained the respect of everybody there. So felt fucking badass for that. And so like in February there was this string of 3 weeks where February 1st I did the strongman competition. February 9th I ran a marathon. And then February 15th, I did this competition called Deca Fit, which, if you're familiar with High Rocks, is very similar to that, and finished in the top 10 for that. And so, you know, I, I'm just in this mode of trying to find different ways to challenge myself and push the needle forward. And so I feel so fucking incredible that I've found this way to put my passion for fitness into more of a tangible action than just going to the gym and trying to push as heavy a weight as I can. And so, regardless if it's strongman, high intensity interval training, ultra marathon running, biking, whatever it is, if there's a challenge out there that people think is going to be difficult to accomplish, I want to put myself to that test and prove to myself, no, fuck that. I'm doing this thing. And so that's the mode that I'm in now.
Man, that is incredible. So you're like, hey, I'm just willing to do whatever is challenging and something. If I think I can't do it, I'm gonna try. And I get that way kind of. I know, like last year when I just rode the reverse slingshot, was like I was like, I need to be scared. It's been a while since I've been scared, and I need to do it on purpose. But how are you paying it forward? Do you have your Get Psyched? Is it Get Psyched Fitness?
That's
And
correct. Yep.
what can, if somebody wants to work with you, what do people work with you on? Kind of what's a typical thing if I'm a client and let's say I want to make some changes, maybe I want to drop some weight, quit some bad habits. Um, I find you. What would how would you start that off, and what does working with you look like?
Yeah, so Get Psyched Fitness, it's fitness with a mental health skew.
Hmm.
So, for example, I host a class every Sunday morning that is called the Sunday Summit. And it's called the Sunday Summit because summit, like summiting a mountain, but also summit as in like, the G4 Summit, a meeting of the minds. And so
Right.
we start off every class with a reading from the Daily Stoic. We do a meditation, then get after a hardcore workout that I hand out a medal to the winner. And then we end with a reflection on what the reading was and group discussion. So it's fitness with a mental health side that helps to, create this full mind, body, spirit connection. And so what I do is, personal training, group fitness, athletic training, so on and so forth. But then I also, did classes with a company called Being True to You to learn how to. Are you familiar?
I feel like they sent me something asking me if I was still interested. Is it for maybe being a psychedelic facilitator type of a thing?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So I did that program last year, and now I coach people on how to use psychedelics to make positive changes of their own. And so, whether it's personal training
Mhm.
or whether it's coaching people through the psychedelic experiences that they want to have found this way to help people,
Right.
and it feels really fucking good.
Yeah. How was the program?
The
Worthwhile?
program, Yeah, definitely insightful, definitely helps to illuminate a lot of things that maybe you've recognized as being there, but have never really put into words or put much intentional thought into how to categorize or how to
Yeah.
help people who maybe have different experiences than you have. So a lot of really good information,
It's
and
just kind of one of
uh,
these things that is interesting that we're arriving at a time and space that this is actually a thing. For some, so similarly, I quit drinking 2 years ago and I got laid off during the pandemic and fucked myself over for 2 years, and in 2022 I'm like something's got to change, and kind of had my you're exactly why you are where you are and why you feel the way you do,
mm,
um and so, yeah, to arrive at a time and place that this is allowed and you can share it, but um, that it could be professionally, that it's more in a legitimate manner, I guess you could say.
hmm exactly. And when I had my experience, it was intended to be recreational, right? I had no
Right.
idea how deeply the changes and revelations that I was going to undergo would affect me. Um, and so, I feel
Have
like
you
I
done
have
it with a facilitator? And
me myself, no, I have
okay,
not.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. So, my experience comes down to my personal experiences and then the insight that I gained from the classes that I took. Um, and being able to share those experiences with people is so fucking powerful, and the changes that I'm able to see people make and how they're able to work through whatever it is that they're trying to work through. It's such a special thing to be able to share with people.
Yeah, so it's kind of, yeah, I had a sit down with Julian Bermudez, who he's in Oregon, where they
Hmm
actually, it's legal and allowed. And so he does facilitation there. And yeah, I think I well, I mean, they've opened it up to ketamine, and I know they're doing similar. There's similar roles where whether it's facilitator, uh, guide, I guess if you will.
hmm
So if they're doing it with ketamine and these legitimate companies, then perhaps it'll move on with psilocybin because I think the benefit of people connecting with self is once they can be honest with themselves, and I think kind of understand that, hey, we're all afraid of the uncertainty and we all get the same ending. So I don't know why we're fucking trying to rush it and make it faster for one another.
That,
you
that's
know?
exactly it, man.
But yeah, but
When,
actually, that's kind of a so people can work with you at Get Psyched. Well, get let me see, I have it here. Took my
yep,
glasses off.
and I
GetPsychedFitness.com.
Yep, and I do online coaching as well. So I have obviously a number of different experiences from powerlifting to ultra distance running to high intensity interval training to yoga, and so I'm able to help people make the most of their athletic endeavors, whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. And I hope to do so in a way that makes people feel appreciated and connected and help them tap into that inner strength that they didn't know that they had. Because, when I went through my experiences uh, with the Spartan races and the ultra distance running and what have you, if you had asked me prior to doing that, you know, what do you think? Are you able to do this? The answer is really, I don't fucking know, right? But
Right.
if you are willing to take that chance and go for something, you're going to impress yourself with how strong you are. And I just hope that I can help as many people as possible to understand that for themselves and push past whatever limiting beliefs they have.
So it's kind of like it's not like how some people they sell their programs and it's strictly fitness and that's what they do. Yours is kind of like you could come to you almost like in a therapy sort of way.
Hmm
That hey, I want to make some changes, or I'm having some issues, or maybe I just need to talk through something, and um, both through your experience and fitness, you're able to provide a path of many different ways, and I love that. So many offerings, but Yeah. Um, Thank you for your time. Sorry to keep
Of
you a
course,
little
Rich.
longer, but it was a great conversation, and I'm excited to get it out to people, and hopefully, you know, hopefully this continues to move forward, and we can get the world to a better place through conversations.
One
And
silly little moment at a time, man.
yes, and plug your book. Put your book on the screen, and I will definitely be putting that in the show notes. Your mindset is your reality.
Yes, sir. Um,
Yes.
Yep, it's available on Amazon. You do have to search for it directly because Amazon doesn't like promoting things with drug context. So
Hmm.
I'm a little limited in my ability to advertise. But if you search for it on Amazon, you'll find it there. My name's John Borden. And if you do read the book, I would love to hear your thoughts and see what came up for you because I've had so many people reach out to me about different pieces of the writing and say that they connected with different things from it. And it really uh, makes me feel good about the time and effort that I put into it because it shows that, my vulnerability throughout the writing and the bare, honest truth about where I was and the type of changes that I was able to make has connected with so many people who have picked it up. So I'm just super grateful for that. And I hope to continue to feel the gratitude from people who do read the book.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you again for giving me your time. That's our most precious commodity, and I appreciate you spending it with me and the audience, and um, grateful to have made a connection of somebody else who would like to see the world end up in a better place if we can all just become the best versions of ourselves. And so, yeah,
Most definitely, Rich. Well,
awesome.
thank you for using your talents. You're a very adept conversationalist, and I enjoyed speaking with you. So, thank you so much for allowing me the space to explain myself and my story and ask poignant questions that help yourself and hopefully the listeners understand, the experience that I had and what I hope to bring to the world. So I appreciate you, Rich.
Awesome, man. Till next time, peace.
Asteroid of fear.